So, good evening. Good evening. My name is Francesco Campagnola, and I'm pleased to have you here today. Welcome to this live stream event organized by the Department of Languages and Culture at Ghent University. So this is the first event in a series of public debates entitled The Digital Republic. And in the next few months, our website will be fully operational, is now under construction. And so please follow us online and follow our future activities at www.digitalrepublic.ugent.be. Today, we're going to talk about Fukushima disaster's political and social consequences for Japan and Europe, and I'm honored and very pleased to introduce to you Professor Oguma Eiji from Keio University in Tokyo and Professor Catherine de Volder from Oxford University. So thank you very much, enjoy the debate, and Catherine, I leave it to you.
Okay, thank you, Francesco. So as Francesco just said, our first guest is a very distinguished guest. It's Professor Oguma, professor at the Faculty of Policy Management at Keio University in Tokyo. Professor Oguma is specialized in historical sociology, and his research covers various topics, including national identity and nationalism, colonial policy, democratic thoughts and social movements in modern Japan. Professor Oguma won several prizes for his written work. One of his famous books is called Genealogy of Japanese Self-Images. More recently, he embarked on a more adventurous project. We could say he directed and produced a documentary called Ask the Prime Minister, which covers the anti-nuclear protests after the Fukushima incident. So, good afternoon.
Now I will make a 15 minutes presentation titled Risk, Unstableness, Movement. And this is a sociological analysis on movement at Fukushima. I'm Eiji, professor of faculty of management, as Stephanie introduced. Okay? And the question is, rise of the social movement in Japan after 2012. Why and in what kind of background? And the second question, what is the character of the change in Japanese society after Fukushima incident? And the third question, how we analyze the change by sociological way? Okay? Next, this is a map of the nuclear reactors in Japan. And Japan has 17 nuclear power plants and 54 nuclear reactors. And Fukushima number 1 power plant has hit by the tsunami in 2011. And this is the slogan gate of desolated nuclear city in Fukushima. And it says, nuclear energy guarantee bright future. But nobody is living here because this city is designated as mandatory evacuation zone, and only wild dogs are walking around here. And this is a photo of the anti-nuclear rally in front of the National Diet in 2012. And at that time, approximately 200,000 people had gathered in front of the Prime Minister's office and National Diet. And okay, we were examining social background of the movement. Yeah. I have to mention about the, factors of the social background of the movement. Number one, stagnation of the economy. Average annual income of the employees has decreased in 50% since 1997, even at the time of 2011. And the increase of the unstable jobs and polarization. The so-called non-regular workers in Japanese words, and this is not part-time workers. They are full-time workers, but they have permanent contract. They don't have permanent contract and not guaranteed of social securities. And they occupy 40% of the employees. And anger against dysfunction and untransparency of the government and mass media. And naturally, nuclear disaster, caused unsatisfaction and anger against dysfunction and untransparency of the government and mass media. Naturally. And the rise of the internet should be the force background of this movement. And nuclear incident triggered a succession of the social movement in Japan. And many of the activists were cognitive precariat. Do you know the cognitive precariat word? And they are educated, highly educated, maybe graduated from master course or something, but couldn't get stable jobs. And unstable workers in post-industrial service jobs. For example, IT business, design, music, PA operation, and so on. And they brought such a kind of skills, their own skills, into social movement after Fukushima incident. That was why, their appearance were somewhat attractive. And they play music, and they operated a PA system in front of the Prime Minister's office, and so on. And many of the individuals who didn't have any experience of the social movement have started to be active after Fukushima incident. And more important things should be big social movement in other topics had theorized after the nuclear incident. And it was summer of the 2012, anti-nuclear energy movement attracted 200,000 participants in front of the Prime Minister's office. However, in 2013, thousands of the people had gathered in front of the Prime Minister's office and the National Diet to protest secrecy bill, which are introduced by Japanese government. And in 2015, over 100,000 people had gathered in front of the National Diet to protest against change of the national defense policy of Japanese government. And such a kind of succession of social movement had happened after Fukushima incident. And I think that the nuclear incident triggered not only nuclear, anti-nuclear energy movement, but also many of the social movement in different topics. And such a kind of succession was caused by not only nuclear incident itself, but also unstableness of Japanese society. And okay, we will enter to the social psychological analysis on the process. Radioactive substances causes fear for invisible and an immediate threat. And nuclear incident broke the trust for the government, mass media, big companies, engineers, doctors, and scientists. It means trust for authorities have been broken. And here, consciousness of risk has risen up in mind of the people. And what is a risk? risk is the idea which makes boundary between safety and danger unstable. Risk is not danger. Danger is definitely danger. But the risk is possibility of danger. It's reported to the boundary between safety and danger. And anxiety for invisible, risk is anxiety for invisible, unimmediate threat, which is hard to be verified. And yes, risk is, risk remains possibility of dangers. And it causes distrust for authorities who cannot guarantee safety. Nobody can guarantee people what is definitely danger or definitely safe in nuclear disaster. Harmful effect of the radioactive substance should be remained in possibility. And the increase of the unstableness is common character of cognitive precarity and the contemporary globalized world. Maybe, effect of, radioactive substance and unstableness of job situation should be different. But it's there is some kind of similarity between them in the words of the risk consciousness. And yes, strong risk consciousness which are shared by cognitive precariat are, very similar consciousness against fear and for nuclear substances. And I think this kind of risk consciousness was the background of serialized social movement in contemporary Japan, which were triggered by nuclear disaster. Nuclear disaster, in other words, triggered increase of the risk consciousness and distrust against authorities. And it triggered a sense of isolation from decision making by authorities. Authorities means political parties, government, mass media, specialists including engineers or doctors and scientists and so on. But it's a very common consciousness in this globalized world. And also, increase of the risk consciousness of cognitive precariat is very common consciousness in this contemporary globalized world also. And the nuclear incident triggered dissatisfaction against authorities and claims for transparency, direct democracy, participation for decision making. And such a kind of character, dissatisfaction against authorities and claims for transparency, direct democracy, participation for decision making is also very common character of social movement in contemporary world. And conclusion, nuclear incident triggered consciousness of risk in Japan and distrust for authorities and rise of social movements. But that was not only, anti-nuclear movement, which triggered by nuclear disaster. I mean that we can find a kind of succession of the social movement had happened after Fukushima incident in Japan. And I think that the anti-nuclear movement after the Fukushima incident in Japan was a part of a global democratic movement in this global risk society. Yeah. I said that when Japanese people had gathered in front of the Prime Minister's office, it was summer of 2012. And it was 1 year after the occupation of the Occupy Wall Street movement, and approximately the same period of Indignados movement in Spain, and 2 years before of Taiwan and Hong Kong movements. And we can find the same kind of social background, in other words, unstableness and risk consciousness in this globalized world in everything. And we may find same kind of social movement, in other words, social movement which don't have any solid organization and which utilize internet and which don't have specific leaders. Yeah, this is a common character of the social movement in this world after maybe 2011. Maybe vanguard should be Egyptian revolution. It was 2 months before the Fukushima incident. And such a kind of socio-psychological process affected the economy and politics also. For example, rise of the safety consciousness and the rise of the social movement and demand for transparency increased the cost of the nuclear energy. Many of the economists evaluated the cost of the nuclear energy should be cheap, but it depends on investment for safety. And the increase of the safety consciousness caused increase of the cost of the nuclear energy. For example, revision of safety regulation in 2012 by Japanese government requires actually $1 billion additional investment for each reactor in Japan to restart. And that means, consciousness of the people reflected to the cost of the nuclear energy. And yeah, okay, thank you for your attention.
Thank you. Okay, so one question that has been on my mind for a while is people always speak of the Fukushima incident, but that sounds so neutral and it makes the event so small. I mean, it was a complete disaster. Is this something that, is this translated from Japanese, the Fukushima incident, to call it just an incident instead of a Fukushima disaster?
Oh, your question should be, how Japanese people call the incident?
Yeah. Well, or why is it called an incident? An incident makes it minimizes the extent of what happened. It's just a small question. It's just out of curiosity. I mean.
Okay, I see. Many of the Japanese newspapers or broadcasting company call this disaster as as a nuclear accident or something.
Yeah.
And but for Japanese people, disaster means earthquake and tsunami also.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah.
And many of the areas hit by not only radioactive substance but also tsunami. So many of the people killed by tsunami. So that for Japanese people and Japanese mass media, disaster means not only nuclear disaster.
Right.
Yes, at that time.
Yeah. Thank you. So. In the documentary, you show all the protests against nuclear energy and people expressing their frustration with the current policy in Japan. So, what is, according to you, the most important result of these protests? What is the most important result that these protests have achieved, according to you? Is it some change in nuclear policy, or is it something else?
Yeah, actually, Japan had 54 nuclear reactors before Fukushima incident, and after the disaster, all of them were stopped. And Japan survived with nuclear energy approximately 2 or 3 years. And now in Japan, only 2 reactors are active. And but it's difficult to evaluate contribution from social movements. And naturally, some of the politicians or bureaucrats do not recognize effort from social movements. And some of them, say that, yes, nuclear reactors in Japan have stopped because of the new regulation which are introduced by Japanese government. But if we would ask them, why you would not restart ignoring the new regulation, and why Japanese safety agency, which examine application from the electricity company, seriously examine, and many Japanese know in ordinary cases, many of the ministry and agency would not be aware. And they were served in nominally, but they wouldn't work. But why new regulation and new safety agency work well? And maybe politicians and bureaucrats would answer, because many of the Japanese people oppose to nuclear energy.
Yes, but it's hard to investigate.
Yes. And then such a kind of bureaucrat or politician would say, strong opposition is shown in opinion polls. But I think consciousness should be represented in specific forms. Maybe one of the forms should be opinion polls, but one of the forms should be social movement, which represent the people's will or something. And I think that I'm not so naive to overestimate effect from social movement. But maybe effect from consciousness or will of the people or effect to the policies. And social movement should be one of the way to represent consciousness or will of the people.
Yes, and maybe one, I don't know whether that's correct, but because you say that these social movements, they sort of help people realize that they could actually make a change, even if only a small change.
Yes.
I think that was very present in your documentary. It's sort of a message of hope, almost. So that could be quite a large effect of these social movements as well, to sort of encourage people to try to make change, at least. Do you agree with that? Or?
Yeah, it depends on your perception. I didn't present any kind of specific perception, and every audience passed in their own ways.
So, presumably there have been anti-nuclear protests before the Fukushima incident. So did the Fukushima incident change the nature of these protests? Was there anything different?
Yes. Naturally, number of the participants have dramatically increased. But it's not only change. And yes, okay, I will explain like this. In 1960s or 70s, social movement in Japan was, very homogenic. The participant, if labor union were mobilized people, all of the participants were laborers. And if student association were organized protest, all of the participants were students, and maybe over 90% should be male students. Very, homogeneous. However, in contemporary situation, participants in social movement after Fukushima incident, we cannot find any kind of specific ascriptions or attribute of the participants. And yes, as I have mentioned about saying about the activists, many of them were cognitive variant, but they don't have actually solid organization to mobilize people. And it means they only disseminate information of the rally of the movements, and they applicate permission of the demonstration or rallies to the police, and they set PA system at the square or in front of the planning office, and they wait. And who knows who should be a participant?
Yeah.
Yes. And that's why we cannot any kind of specific ascription or gender or social class or ages, generations.
Yeah, so what you're saying is that the organizers might be from a particular group in society, but the protesters themselves are from all parts of society.
Yes, that reflects the change of the society itself. And in other words, in contemporary situations, social movement were not organized by specific sectors or specific organizations.
Mm-hmm. So another question, so to outsiders, Japan is known as a conformist society where people sort of respect strict hierarchies and wouldn't really do anything that is out of line what is expected. So has something changed in Japanese society now that people seem to protest more easily, or was it always there? Or is our image about Japan simply wrong?
I think every society has its own authorities. And I think European society has its own hierarchy system, I think. But thinking about the situation in Japan, and maybe, some kind of atomization and disorganization, which is caused by the process of the modernization and the process of the increase of the risk consciousness. Risk consciousness means increase of the people who don't have any kind of authority which guarantee stableness. And if this consciousness will be increased, there is no way to submit to the authorities. Mm-hmm. And naturally, now in Japan, many of the company cannot, guarantee lifetime long employment because of the stagnation of the economy and the globalization and the deregulation and so on. And you said that Japan has its own, hierarchical sentiment, but I think it was caused by some kind of guarantee. Yeah, in other words, such like, if we would obey authority, authority would guarantee stableness.
Mm-hmm.
But such a kind of social background have changed.
Right. But that might be especially the case in Tokyo. Would that also be the case in other parts of Japan?
Yes.
You think it's the same? So the atomization you're talking about, I'd imagine that takes place in metropolitan cities, but perhaps not outside these big cities like Osaka?
Yeah. Okay, I will explain. Saying about the local side in Japan, not the local cities, they are annoyed by dead population and aging because many of the younger generation drained out from the society, local society, because they didn't prefer authority. And they drained into big cities, and many of them go into get unstable jobs. This is the situation.
Yeah.
Yes.
So the current image that some of us have about Japanese, that very general, that they're sort of quite sort of resistant to change and just do what the boss say or their colleagues do, that wouldn't apply so much anymore now in the big cities?
If you would expect many of the Japanese people are always shouting or claiming or something, it would be definitely. But I think I only explain, social background have changed and increase of unstableness in city side, and thinking about the local side, only who guarantee stableness by authority is remaining in local side, and the Japanese government tried to settlement of the population by distribution of subsidies or public works for local side, but it caused huge budget deficit. And as you may know, total budget deficit of Japanese government and the local government amounts approximately 2.3 times of the GDP. And I think such a kind of redistribution would not last so long.
I was just wondering whether you could tell us a bit more about the dynamic between political parties and these social movements, these grassroots movements. As far as I understood, they're quite different from political parties in the sense that they don't have leaders or they don't have people sort of at the forefront. Everyone has a certain function. Could you sort of say something about the relationship between political parties and these social movements?
That is program. Yeah. Okay. I will explain like this. Do you know how many party members LDP, the dominant party in Japan, has? No? Yeah, naturally. And LDP, dominant party in Japan, had 5.5 million party members in 1991. It was the peak of the Japanese economy. And nowadays, do you know? Please guess.
2 million.
2 million? Yeah, 800,000. Yeah, dramatically reduced. And because of globalization, deregulation, privatization of postal office and so on, and many of the party members of the LDP will consist of local association, local agricultural associations, the construction companies which guarantee jobs by public, job investment or something. But deregulation and the cut of the expenditure to the government were introduced in 2000 to 2005 around, and the postal office was also many LDP party members had, but the postal office service were privatized in 2005, and that caused reduction of party members of LDP. And in other words, this reflects the change of the Japanese society. And in other words, Japanese society is now, experience degrees of status. And I think it's not a good situation that such a kind of atomization and erection of the organization easily cause social movements. And that's why, DPJ was dominant party at the disaster time. How to react against the social movement, because DPJ didn't have party members less than LDP. Actually, they don't have solid organization. They only rely on floating points. So that they are very sensitive of the voice from people.
Yeah, and so the social organizations, they don't have any, how to say, like a voice of a certain political party. It's not like, for example, the Socialist Party is sort of present in these social movements.
Yeah. Japanese Communist Party and Japanese Social Democratic Party existing in Japan. But however, they also, experience the decline of the organization. And now,
but do they sort of openly support these social movements against nuclear energy?
Yes. However, actually, they didn't, and they don't have much power. That because Japanese Communist Party or Japanese Social Democratic Party and even Japanese Democratic Party try to access social movement. In other words, they have no resources. Such a kind of political party have no resources.
But a different question. So, do you think that these marches and demonstrations, like the ones you showed in your documentary, are actually the best way to cause change in Japanese society? Do you think they can be effective? And I'm asking this because I read a criticism by some Japanese IT engineer who complained about the ineffectiveness of mainstream political protest. And he said, well, it doesn't make sense that people sort of are chanting, we need change in front of a building where perhaps even no politicians are present. And he launched this website, Japan Changer. And so people can fill out a web form and pay, I don't know, about 40 euros or something. And then a statement of protest will be faxed to all members of the Diet, 717 members. And he thinks that it's much more effective to sort of disrupt the work of the Diet rather than sort of having these protests in the streets. Do you agree? Or?
No, there are so many ways to answer to the political decision, and maybe it's good for him. Yeah. However, more important problem should be Diet members, especially Diet members of the Conservative Party in Japan, don't have chance to meet with unorganized sectors and voice from unorganized sectors. And Diet members of the Conservative parties every day meeting with leader of the merchant associations, the leader of the local associations, the leader of the business committees, and so on. However, many of the Diet members knows, their organization has declined. because many of the direct members know well. Yeah, when they tried to rely on such a kind of organization, they couldn't get votes in their constituency as they expected. But they had no idea how to access unorganized sectors. That is the most big problem. Yes. And that's explaining, voices from unorganized sector in Japan hard to access to the political world. But at the same time, organized sectors shrink and shrink. Yes. And just like people in Japan divided into two nations. One nation well organized. Well organized means organized by labor union, in big corporation, and merchant associations, agricultural associations, and so on. But this sector has access to the political sectors, political decisions, but this sector is shrinking. And then this is aging. Because, members of this sector had, established their own status until 1980s or 90s. And many of them were getting old. And the other side, many of the younger generation, especially city side, were unorganized. They have no access to labor unions, merchant associations, agricultural associations, local associations, and so on. In other words, they have no access to, Japanese Communist Party or LDP, Conservative Party, and so on. And they left to be atomized. And Japanese mass media stick to report to the established sectors. And many of the Japanese mass media cover the activities of politicians and labor unions and LDP direct members, but they have no idea. Japanese mass media don't have any idea to how to access unorganized sectors.
But that must be changing now, right? I mean, they've had some time that.
Changing.
Right.
Changing. Yes, changing is reflected to the decrease of the subscribers of the newspapers. Yes. Actually, younger generation in our sectors, they don't care about the news in newspapers because they feel newspapers in Japan actually ignore them. Yes. Yeah. And such a kind of vicious cycle is proceeding. It's very dangerous.
What is dangerous exactly?
You may imagine. Now, maybe half or 60% of the people will be covered by stable sectors. However, in the future, this sector should be shrunk into 30% or 20%. And in this future, no mass media or no political party will not cover unorganized sector. What will be happening? Maybe chaos. And that was why I focused on the social movement, which have risen up unorganized sectors.
Yes, because they don't have any leaders, or they're in the social movements that you showed, they sort of resist the idea of having following the sort of traditional structures.
Yes, and also it's good, object. Yeah, I say object to examine change of the Japanese society, and also, it's good development. And if we were we would not be able to find any kind of rise of the social movement from unorganized sector. Future would be more dangerous.
Yes. So
I think it would be much more better to rise up social movement, more than to commit to crime.
yes, and so far, I mean, the protests have been very peaceful. People are very sort of calm, and they leave at certain times in the evening. They don't hang around. But I was just wondering if it was sort of necessary to achieve more change, to perhaps even break the law. I'm talking about civil disobedience. Do you think that would be sort of a possible or an acceptable route to take for these social movements? I'm thinking here of similar movements here in Europe, the anti-GMO, so genetically modified organisms movements, has been very active, and they have their protests are not always peaceful, and they've destroyed fields with genetically modified organisms, and they justify this because they think, well, that's the only way to have an effect. Do you think something like that is happening, might happen in the near future in Japan?
Each society has its own context, and it means each society has its own specific topics, which could attract many people. And we may find the same kind of social background all around in the world. Increase of unstableness and increase of risk consciousness and decrease of the organizations, many of the organizations, and the labor unions and church or religion or something, and the rise of the new kind of religious movement or fundamentalism and so on. And this of the consciousness caused some kind of, social movements. And for example, a claim against medical safetyness or something. So. And however, social background is same in all around the world. But the topic will be different in each society. And for example, why anti-Chinese topic would be a good topic to mobilize people in Taiwan and Hong Kong, and to protect the Constitution, Article 9 or something should be a good topic which attract many participants in Japan. It depends on historical context of each own societies. Maybe I think French society or Belgian society or German society has its own specific topic which is established in the process of the history or something.
So are you saying that the topics differ, but what are the similarities then? More the structure of the movement?
But I think we cannot, predict what kind of topics should be, most attractive topics in each society. For example, I didn't expect anti-nuclear energy movement will happen in Japan in such a huge mass scale. And I mentioned about anti-security bill movement in last summer in Japan, and it attracted over 100,000 people in front of the diets. But I didn't expect such a kind of movement would happen, because peace movement or protect the constitution movement is very too much traditional. And I thought that such a kind of topics will die out already. But I was surprised. Why such a kind of traditional topic attract such a kind of so many participants. And many of them were not elderly generation, but many of the students or younger generation had participated in the movement. And however, I noticed that the student, a member of the organizing group, made a speech. He confessed that, yes, she confessed that she had already debt, 6 million yen. 6 million yen is 60,000, 60,000 euros by student loan. Have already. And if she would not get stable jobs, she would bankrupt. But such a kind of risk consciousness caused, some kind of movement for her.
Do you think there's any difference between the anti-nuclear movements in Japan and the one that we see in Europe now? Do you think they're very similar, or?
Yeah, I'm not sure about the European movements. But yeah, I have visited, Hong Kong. It was October 2014, and I was guided by the locals, and I had, asked many things for local peoples, and I felt that the social background is approximately the same. Job situation of the graduate of the university in Hong Kong is very good. And 60-meter square apartment cost $2 million in Hong Kong. And if 60 square meter apartment will be $2 million, and many of the graduates from university in Hong Kong would not be able to get stable jobs. There will be no future. But they regarded such a kind of land price rising as caused by investment from continental China. Yeah. But who knows how much contribution from China and how much contribution from globalization itself.
So, following the Fukushima incident, in Italy, they had a 1-year moratorium on plans to revive nuclear power. And then in 2011, Italian voters passed a referendum to cancel plans for new reactors. So, would a similar referendum be a realistic option for Japan?
Yeah, basically, I think unsatisfaction against indirect democracy increase, even in Japan, maybe all around the world. And it caused demand for referendum. In other words, a kind of, and one of the ways of direct democracy. And this is basic trend. But however, to employ a referendum by a specific government should be depend on the situation. And it requires introduction of the new legal system or something. And the same with Japan. Japan actually doesn't have any legal system to introduce referendum.
Yeah. Just maybe one more question. So, just wonder whether these social movements can also be, whether it's always a good thing to have these social movements, so to say. Do these people actually know enough about nuclear energy and the risks would it be a good thing if they actually have an effect on the policy? I guess that's what I want to say. So nuclear energy it appeals to the imagination, everyone is scared, I would be terrified probably, but in the end, other sources of energy are very dangerous too, of course, it's a very complicated debate. Isn't there a risk that sort of these social movements express certain emotions, obviously, but that could be very wrong? And it's better that they don't have an effect?
As I have told you, to evaluate the effects of the social movement is very difficult. And how much contribution should be come from social movement, it's impossible to evaluate. And however, I think nuclear energy is a kind of symbol of stableness or authority or something which is established in mid of the 20th century. Yeah, and there are so many symbols of the mid of the 20th century exist in this world. So-called universal suffrage, which were introduced after the World War, and economic development, which are enjoyed by the developed country in 1960s. It means after the Second World War, and labor unions and stable organizations, and which guaranteed indirect democracy system based on suffrage, universal suffrage. All of them were, a kind of invention of the mid of the 20th century. And also, nuclear energy is one of them, I think. And nuclear energy requires big organization, because nuclear energy itself requires, specialists to deal with, and nuclear energy requires, hierarchical system in their nature, because nuclear energy cannot be dealt by ordinary citizens. It needs specialists and secrets and hierarchical system and stableness, and it means investment to build nuclear power plants requires huge investment, and nuclear power plant requires 30 years stable continuing of the acting to compensation for investments. And who can guarantee 30 years stableness? It was possible only late 20th century. And I think it depends on the political situation. Future of the nuclear energy in Japan. It depends on the political situation. But I think nuclear energy had already kicked out in developed country. And we can now find the development of the nuclear energy in developing world. And of course, cost of the nuclear energy should be very cheap. In the society which don't have any consciousness of the safety, and any consciousness of the human rights, any consciousness of the transparency or something, that the increase of the demand for the transparency and increase of the safety consciousness or increase of the human rights requires cost for nuclear energy. Yes. And I think it's unstoppable process.
Yes, thank you very much. I think we'll leave it at this. So thank you very much, Professor Oguma, for the interview.
Yeah, thank you.